live, and it is Wednesday. So we do these every single Monday, Wednesday, and on Fridays. And the intent of it is to really kind of address some of the questions that keep coming up, be it questions that you guys send us from these lives, or things that come up through Mastery, and in general, be able to do a Q&A in about a half an hour to a 40-minute session. So that's kind of the whole intent of it. So having said that, welcome to the live. So we have a few questions. And then, by the way, I want to congratulate the other day, there was a question that was asked regarding, hey, Anand, can you do me a favor? Could you just hit that fan thing? There was a question the other day that was asked regarding a property that somebody was trying to flip, and I was suggesting to them that please do not sell the property, keep it. So I want to congratulate you guys that you did decide to keep it, and we kind of appreciate the feedback. This couple is not from Mastery, but at least they kind of followed the advice. I think you will never regret keeping that property. That is a phenomenally good property. So I just wanted to congratulate you for keeping the property and not flipping the property, because in your situation, it does not make sense to flip it. Question number one. So question number one today was in terms of when is the right point for me to incorporate, meaning to set up a LLC. Should I go with S Corp, LLC? What is the best route? Number one, you should incorporate based on where you are. So meaning that if you have, basically, if you intend to treat real estate as a business, you should incorporate and you should buy your properties in an LLC, unless you're going to buy the property and get a residential mortgage on your property. So this is particularly related to somebody that asked, because they're closing on a 3-unit building. So because they're closing on a 3-unit building, my suggestion to them was, how are you going to buy the property? Are you going to buy the property? How did you write the contract? They're like, well, we wrote the contract in our personal name, which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. How do you intend to hold title to the property? So they said, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, for long term, do you want to own it in your name, John Smith, let's just say, or would you rather own it in a John Smith LLC? They're like, well, we don't understand the difference between owning it in my personal name versus owning it in an LLC. So what is the difference and why do we do it? So the difference is that if you own it under John Smith, there's nothing wrong with that. Mind you, understand that. Right? It's not like there's anything wrong with it. The reason we put something in an LLC, in something in an entity, is to contain the risk that may be associated with a rental, right? Or with a flip, or whatever the case may be. Generally, if you have let's just say a car dealership you own, generally, even though it may be John Doe's Ford dealership, right? Still, it's a business, so any liability associated with it, you're going to separate it from you, the person, versus you, the business, right? Hence, we put different things in a LLC. So, but before we do that, what we have to consider it for us as a real estate investor, what type of a loan are we going to put on the property? So if we're going to put a loan on the property, that is going to be a residential loan for a rental property. So this is important. Residential loan for a rental property, then the property needs to still be in your personal name. Once you get the refinance done, at that point, you're going to open a LLC and then quit claim the property, and make sure when you do the quit claim, make sure you get a little bit of title coverage. It's going to cost you a couple $100. That's all it's going to cost you. And at that point, you transfer the property into that particular LLC. That's one way of doing it. And the reason you're doing that is so you remove that from your personal name and you have a different entity that holds that particular rental property. Now, if you own a couple of rental properties, 3, 4 rental properties in your personal name, is that the end of the world? No, it is not. No, it is not. It is not the end of the world as long as you have proper insurance, right? You have much more liability than on a car that we all drive every single day and we're texting and doing all kinds of, we all do it, right? That's much more liability than just owning a rental property or two or three, right? Even if there's a lawsuit, there is an insurance company that if you have proper insurance, if you have proper umbrella coverage. So this whole idea that, oh my God, I have to be scared all the time. There's nothing you have to be scared of. But a proper way to run a business, when you have to do that, then the proper way to run a business is that you separate that particular property from you, the person, into a entity. So let's say somebody like me, since I buy a lot of real estate, whenever I buy any real estate, I'm going to always buy it in an entity, in an LLC. So when is the best time to set up the LLC? The best time ideally is when you're buying the property, you're directly putting it in the LLC, but then realize you're not going to get the best interest rate when you refinance it. You're going to have to go get a commercial loan. Why? Because it's in a commercial LLC, in a commercial entity. Hence, you're going to have to get a commercial loan. We do that on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of houses. No big deal, but then your rate is going to be a little bit higher. In this particular situation, these people are buying a 3-unit building. They're paying close to $600,000 for this particular 3-unit building, and they're buying it in their personal name. If you look at the difference between buying it as a LLC versus buying it in their personal name, and you do the delta between the two. So I want to just show you guys the difference in terms of what the difference would be in terms of a payment, because we have to be strategic when we do something. You can get all the protection. It just depends on how you structure it. So on a $600,000 loan, and I'm going to take the insurance and taxes out of it because that has nothing to do with the loan payments on this. At a 8% currently, their payment would be $4,202, right? That would be their payment on a commercial loan. If they do a residential, and then their payment would be $3,792. So here's the difference. So what I wanted them to do was run these two numbers. I hope if you're listening to today's live that you did do the numbers for yourself. So the way I would structure it in your particular situation is I would go ahead, keep the property in your personal name. I would go ahead and do the refinance after your rehab is done, because I know you have about $100,000 rehab to do in the property. That's an excellent property because I believe that property is going to appraise out at somewhere around $800,000. You're buying the property for $560,000, I believe. You're going to do about $100,000 in rehab. So you're going to have a good amount of equity in the property. My suggestion would be is you do a 80% residential loan. You should be able to do that. No problem. And you put a residential loan on that particular property. Your payments for principal interest only, I'm talking about, are going to be $3,792. Versus if you have a commercial loan on the property, your payments are going to be $4,402. So what is the difference? The difference between that number is almost $800. Almost $800. That's a significant amount of money. So it makes sense in your particular case to go ahead and buy the property in the residential as a residential loan. Once that refinance is done, at that point, you do a transfer, and that is not going to trigger your due on sale clause. So you don't have to worry about that. And then you put that property in the LLC at that point in your particular situation. I hope I explained it fully so everybody understands it. Otherwise, for somebody like me, I'm not doing any residential loans because it's just not possible at this point with the amount of loans that I have. So it makes sense to just do commercial loans right from the get-go. So you'd set up the LLC right up front. Next question was, what state should I be setting it up in? If you have the property, since this property is being bought in Illinois, you need to have a Illinois LLC because where do you want the protection? You want the protection in Illinois, right? So then you need to have a Illinois LLC. Now, whether you should have another LLC that basically further owns it, which is a holding company that owns that particular LLC, that's a different point. For right now, please don't worry about it. But if you're going to buy the property in Illinois, then you need Illinois protection so that you can basically have an LLC in Illinois. So you're going to incorporate in the state that you own that real estate in. Now, if there's another holding entity that is outside, that's completely different, but at least you need an incorporation in the state that you own the property in. That's the very, very least that you need. Question number 2, is it true that you need a license to assign a contract or to do a double close in Illinois? So the rule, they came out with it about 3 or 4 years ago. What it says is that if you're going to do more than one transaction, that is a wholesale, then you need to have a real estate license. More than one transaction in a year, right? So basically what they're trying to go after is that if you're going to do wholesales as your business, then you need to have a real estate license, because what does a business mean? You're doing 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 of those, and you need to have a real estate license to be able to wholesale a property, because you're basically engaged in the real estate, in the business of wholesaling properties. Now, let me explain that another way, that if you're doing one wholesale, you make $30,000, let's say, on that wholesale. Do you need to do anything else? No. I mean, you did one wholesale, that's fine. What if you bought another property, right? If you're buying another property with the intent of doing a flip on it, meaning you buy the property, you keep the property for 10, 15 days, let's say, and then you're like, no, I changed my mind. And I'm going to just go ahead and put it back on the market. What is that? It's a flip, right? Nobody says that in a flip, you have to do any work. You could put it right back on the market and resell it. That's a perfect flip. Why? Because it's called intent, right? Intent is very important when we talk about any of these things, which is, what was your intent? And now, what you can't do is, you can't go do 30 transactions and say, well, every one of them I intended to do an actual fix and flip, and every one of them I just stick it back on the market, right? That's not, you know what the intent is. The intent is to do wholesale. You're just trying to get around the system. Nobody's policing this, guys. So genuinely, if you're doing one wholesale as per the rule in Illinois, then you're perfectly fine. If you're going to do more than that, your intent is to do wholesales, you should get a Illinois real estate broker's license. If your intent is to do flips, like for me, I don't have a real estate license anymore. I sent it back last year, right? I just sent back to state. I said, I don't need the license anymore. Why? Because I'm not in the business of wholesaling properties. I either buy properties to hold or I do some flips. Now, is it possible that I may wholesale a property or two a year? It's possible. But my intent 99.9% times is never just to run a wholesale business. My intent genuinely is to buy and hold properties. I can prove that. I can prove I genuinely do flips. Now, is it possible that the property comes along and I decide to wholesale it? Sure, that's perfectly fine. But the intent of that law, it was written to avoid people who, number one, they're not operating in an ethical manner, who are avoiding having a real estate license, and they're not running the business, and they're not properly licensed. That was the intent of that particular law when it was written in Illinois. So just keep that in mind. Nobody's stopping you from doing a wholesale or two. If you're going to run a business of wholesaling, you should properly get licensed. That's what the law is intended for. Then that's what you should do. But if you're doing a fix and flip and you change your mind and you sell the property, nobody can stop you from doing that. Now, you're flipping a contract, that's what you do, then make sure you go ahead and get your license. So that's all it is. Now, the next question was related to banks. Well, which bank or credit union is investor friendly to develop a relationship with, right? So when it comes to banks and credit unions, the place you go and get the list of it for any state, it's called Bauer Index or Bauer Financial, B-A-U-E-R Financial. You go on Google, type that in, boom, it'll give you all the list. Take out all the banks that are big banks that you know, the PNCs, the Chases, the Wells Fargos, all the big banks that you're aware of, take all of those out. What you're looking for is the banks that have 1, 2, 3 branches. You're looking for small credit unions. Like next door, we have a credit union here. Those are the types of places that you're looking for, because generally those banks do what is called portfolio lending. So those are the banks that can give you a commercial loan on your rental property. So then those are the banks that you engage in conversation with. And generally, those banks will lend within a footprint. So let's say you have a property in Oak Park. Then talk to the Oak Park Bank and Trust, because they are more likely to give you a loan. So if you go to a bank in, say, way south of the city, right, generally, if they don't have a presence in Oak Park, generally they're not going to want to do a loan for you in Oak Park. Not that they can't, but generally that's not what they prefer. Generally, you want to be in look at it as a 3-4 mile radius, 5 mile radius. Now, once you have a built relationship with some of these smaller banks, now they will step outside of their comfort zone, their own footprint area, because these are chartered banks. So they have a charter, meaning these are the areas, these are the customers that we're serving in these zip codes. So generally, they try to stick to that. Now, have I gotten loans outside of the immediate area from the banks? Yes. But then again, we have a developed relationship with these banks that we have done business with them for years and years and years. So just keep that in mind. So those are the banks that you want to go after. Same thing with credit unions. Some of the most underutilized places happen to be credit unions, and a lot of times people don't utilize them as much. Next question was, Andrew, I'm trying to find properties off market and I'm having trouble figuring out what my budget should be. So how do I figure that out? So my belief is that if you're going to basically try to do off market deals, and you're looking for deals that are off market, first you have to figure out, okay, what is realistic for you in terms of budget? Right? Are you somebody that just absolutely has no money? If you have absolutely no money, you're going to have to do a couple of things. You're going to either have to do driving for dollars, or you're going to basically have to get a list and skip trace the list and do cold calling. If you say, I just absolutely have no money, right? That's going to be the least expensive way. If you are somebody that says, no, I can dedicate a little bit of money every single month, and if that's who you are, then I would figure out, okay, what is that money? Let's just say for you, you say, okay, that for the year or starting out, I have $3,000 budget. I would take a $3,000 budget, I would divide it by 6, right? Why 6? Because it's 6 months. And then whatever that number comes to, so if it's $400, then it's $400. And then I would figure out what is the one list that I'm going to go after. Actually, we're doing something like that as we speak, right? That we're going to go back to mailings, and I came up with a budget for me for the year, right? And then I took that entire budget and I said, okay, what is a commitment I'm willing to make? And I know I'm going to have to make a 6 to 7 month commitment, because anything less than that, I'm not going to get results. And how is it that I'm going to be able to consistently be able to get leads and be able to justify the expense? So for me, when I started, so I had done this about a year ago, and I had put a budget for me at the time was $700 a month. 700, 700, 700. In month 3, we started getting results. So then I bumped it up to about 1,200. Then from 1,200, I bumped it up to about 2,400, right? But it was based on the results. I didn't want to go, because I was attempting a bunch of things at the same time. So I didn't want to just have a unlimited budget, because you're going to spend the money. At some point, you're going to run out of it, because you're not going to get a result that is equivalent. And now you're going to be like, oh, I spent all this money, real estate doesn't work. Real estate works, need to know how you work it. So if your budget is $3,000 or $4,000, whatever that budget is, I would divide that by 6. And then I would plan on doing a mailing campaign for a minimum of 6 months. And then you have to kind of narrow down the type of properties. So if I'm looking for properties, generally, what are the properties I'm looking for? Generally, I'm looking for properties that are going to be built anywhere from 60s to about 40s or 50s. That's the general Chicago inventory, right? I know I'm not going to find properties that are built in 2000 at the numbers that I want, because in most of the areas, even A areas where I'm buying, a lot of these properties are 60s, 70s built properties. That's what the market is. Then I'm obviously looking for single families, right? I'm okay with 2 to 4 flats, but I'm not targeting that specifically in a mailing. So I keep it to single family searches. Then I'm going to look at, okay, what zip codes do I want? And generally, what is the price range that I want to be in? So if I can buy the property somewhere around 200, 250, 260, even up to 300, I can do that, right? But then on the back end, if the properties are worth 800, 900,000, generally I know I'm probably not going to be able to get that at 250,000 bucks, right? That's just common sense. But a property that's 450, I can probably get that for 250. That's doable because it's going to need some rehab. So I'm going to first come up with a criteria. Number one, what are the zip codes that I want? That's number one. Number two, what is the type of property? That's going to be single families. Number three, now if you say you want to focus on 2 to 4 flats, then you can focus on those, right? So if you're saying, okay, I'm going to go to Berwyn, I'm going to go to Cicero, I'm going to go to Stickney, I'm going to go to certain parts of Chicago, right? Where you have a lot of availability for 2 to 4 flats, or then you can target that. But just understand, it's going to bring down the amount of mailings that you can do if that's what you choose to do. I choose to do single families because my hit ratio, I believe, is going to be higher. Then I'm going to go look at, okay, ballpark, what is the square footage? Well, 800 to about 1,500 square footage, because that's where most of the properties that I'm looking at are going to fit, even in A and B areas. So that's the next criteria. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that list, cull it down with that sort of a thing, and then I'm going to do mailing to that list. Now, mind you, also, I'm going to look at, am I looking at absentee owners? Am I looking at high equity? Am I looking at properties that are in pre-foreclosure, right? What is it that I'm looking for? A high equity list is a lot better list rather than just looking at a pre-foreclosure list, right? Because a pre-foreclosure list is going to have a lot of not so motivated people. So how do you develop a hot list out of that? The way we develop a hot list is we'll take a pre-foreclosure list, or we'll take an absentee owner list, and then we'll look at what is their sales score. Is their sales score is higher? If it's higher than 7, then we're going to go after the 7s to the 10s. Those are the people that we're going to go after. Now, what is a 10? Well, a 10 is somebody who basically has the property on the MLS. So then it's open to everybody. But generally, you're going to find 7 to 9s, which is there are some markers that are there that there is a probably a reasonable expectation that this person is going to sell the property within the next 1 to 5 years. And so those are the criterias, and that's not a exact science. Some of it is going to be kind of a little bit of a judgment call that we're going to make. So that is the list that we are going to go after generally, because that will create much more kind of a warm audience to target to. The next question was regards with, this was a question specifically regarding septic and septic and well. Should I look at a property that is a well and septic property, or should I walk away from it? Well, I mean, to me, it makes no difference. If the property is on well and septic, right, should you look at it? Absolutely. Absolutely. If the property makes sense and the numbers are good, you should not walk away from the property at all. That is a well and septic property, because people don't mind. There's a flip I'm doing in Wheaton. Last year we did a flip in Medina. There's another flip we did in this part of Roselle, right next in that same area. Those were all properties that are on well and septic, and nothing wrong with it. I own a bunch of properties that have well. And that is what it is. So no big deal, no reason for you to walk away from it just because the property is on well and septic, and there's nothing to be afraid of. Get a septic test done, get a well test done, and the only way you're going to fail a well test is only 2 things. One, there may be E. coli, which is very common to be found in a well test, especially when a well is not being used. It's easy to fix. You pour bleach down the well, and including the wellhead, and you just run it. It just clears, because there's not enough water pumping through the system. That's why that happens. It's a simple problem to solve. It's not a big deal at all. May sound bad, but it's a very simple problem to solve. And then the only other thing you want to do is you want to do a test for septic to make sure your septic field is working properly, and that your that tank is not full, that sort of thing. The worst thing that can happen, right? Let me just explain to you. I have not seen it. Hopefully I don't, but you just don't know, right? So is that the only thing is that when you have an old concrete tank, and it's very, very, very rare. So nowadays, new septic tanks that are put in, they tend to be this plastic sort of material, which is obviously not biodegradable, and any of the waste does not eat that particular material, right? Is resistant to that. But concrete, you would think, won't be eaten, but over time, the concrete degrades. So what you don't want is a collapsed concrete, because now it becomes a biohazard because of the waste material in there, and now the cleanup can be expensive. Anything can be fixed, but it just can be expensive. So that's the only thing to be aware of. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. The next thing was, should I be, I want to buy my first property. Should I buy a property that is a flip, or should I buy a property as a house hack, right? Now, this is a loaded question, right? It depends on what do you want to do. That do you want to do a house hack, live in the property, and then basically have the property cash flow, or do you want to do a flip? So it depends on what you are. I think rather than looking at a property as if I should flip, if I should do house hack, what you should be looking for is you should be looking for a good deal. That's what you should focus on. Don't focus on a house hack, or don't focus on a flip. If it makes sense to flip the property, you flip it. If it makes sense to do a house hack on the property, you do a house hack. So it should not be based on that, well, I'm going to ignore something else, because if there's a property that makes good sense, then don't pass that by just because I wasn't looking for it. There's somebody, I just had a conversation with somebody in Mastery, they found a property, they're like, but you know, Andrew, I was looking for a rental, and this property doesn't work as a rental. I'm like, okay, that's fine. If it doesn't work as a rental, it works for a great flip, right? Why don't you just flip it? They're like, oh, I guess that makes sense, right? I'm like, you could wholesale the property and make some money on it, but why would you wholesale it? If you can flip the property and you can make a good $70,000 on that particular property, and it's not a very difficult flip, then okay, you were looking for a rental, understand, but you happen to bumble into a flip, right, while looking for rentals, and you realize the taxes are just obnoxiously high. They're never going to come down in that particular location, but it yields for a great flip. Then do the flip, or just wholesale it. You still make money. Don't walk away from the property because that would be silly, right? You've already done the work, so might as well enjoy the profits. You found the property, so you can either wholesale it or you can flip it. And a lot of times this happens to people, that they start going after, oh, I'm looking for a rental. Oh, I'm looking for a flip. Oh, I'm looking for a wholesale. What you should be looking for is you should be looking for a good deal, period, right? That's the business we're in. That's our business as a real estate investor. If you can flip it, great. If you can wholesale it, that's fine. If you can do a rental, that's fine. If you can do a midterm Airbnb, what you look for once you've found the properties, what is the highest and best use of the property for me today, right? Because today I may need to do flips. So then that's what I'm going to do. But then 6 months from now, you've done a few flips. Just had a conversation with Jesse. Actually, we made a video about it, that he has a property that he bought in Westchester, and he was going to flip it, but the contractor that was doing the work is like, hey man, I'll rent the property from you. And he was getting $2,800 in rent on this property from the contractor. And now the property is, the contractor is moving out. It's been about 2 years. He's like, well, what should I do? I'm like, well, how much would you make if you flip the property? He's like, well, I'd make $72,000. Great amount of money. But guess what? I'm like, Jesse, do you need the $72,000 today? He's like, no, I don't really need it. I'm like, then you keep it. It's in Westchester. It's a great location. You know you can get great rent over there. He's like, yeah, man, but my cash flow is going to be a little bit less. I'm like, I understand. The cash flow is going to be a little less because the interest rates are high right now. So that's okay. But I'm like, in a couple of years, when the interest rates come down, you can just refinance it, and you're going to have $600 cash flow. So you'll be back at your numbers. So it's just too good a property for you to sell. And if you don't have to sell it, then do not sell the property. So that's how you have to look at the whole thing, is that look for a good deal. If it happens to be a flip, then you do a flip, if that's what you need at that particular time. But if it makes for a great rental or great Airbnb or a great wholesale, then that's what you do with that property. Don't just say, no, that all I do is wholesale. That's silly. You should be looking at what is the highest and best use for me today, and then what am I ultimately trying to build? If I'm trying to build ultimately cash flow for life, then that is what my focus should be all the time. And then you flip, wholesale, whatever, as the need be, depending on where you are at that particular time and what makes the best sense for that particular property. Having said that, guys, keep the questions rolling in. We love it to answer these questions. It's always beneficial, not only for you, but for other people that watch these videos. So keep rolling the questions in. Again, the 3-day is 16th, 17th, 18th. We are 400 plus tickets sold already at this point. So the limitation is 500 people. That's our limitation for the room. So if you haven't registered, go to andrewholmesevents.com. That's andrewholmesevents.com. And we're super thrilled. 2024 is working out to be a bigger year than ever in terms of flips, in terms of what is going on with the market. So we're excited. Hopefully you will get a chance to join if you haven't. And guys, let's not just show up at the 3-day. Let's become somebody who actually takes that first step and actually puts the information to use, because just showing up is not what we want. What we want is people who are action takers, people who participate, and let's make it happen. Let's do it as a team. Talk to you soon.